Every single day we wake up to a new crisis, to a new conflict. Everything has gone on fire since the time Joe Biden took over. Afghanistan's gone down. Ukraine has been invaded. Now the Philippines and the Chinese are on the verge of something bad happening every single day, not to mention the threats to Taiwan. We have this blow up in Haiti going on in our very own hemisphere. We wake up every single day, terrorist attacks, 9 million people across the border.
I mean,
that's what matters
you're not
to me.
suggesting that's all happening because of Biden.
Absolutely, I am. Absolutely, I'm suggesting it happening because of Biden.
We are way worse off than we were. Marco Rubio just laid it out there for Jonathan Karl. So Marco Rubio was a guest on This Week with David Brinkley, except now David Brinkley is dead, so the best they've got is George Stephanopoulos, and some days he's not there. Then you've got Jonathan Karl. I believe that is the official name of the show. But it's ABC News' version of Meet the Press, and it's terrible. But Marco Rubio, like every other politician in Washington, D.C., thinks that he should go on these Sunday shows so that they can say they went on a Sunday show. And Jonathan Karl asked him if he had any interest in being Donald Trump's running mate. Now, I haven't heard Marco Rubio on anybody's short list for running mate, but you get a prominent Republican who's run for president and has a profile, and I guess this is the perfunctory thing that you ask. So here's how that questioning went.
There was some reporting this week that you are possibly under consideration to be Donald Trump's running mate. I don't put a lot of stock in this reporting right now, or we're early. But you said it would be an honor to be offered a spot on his ticket. Really?
Yeah, I think anyone who's offered the opportunity to serve this country as vice president should be honored by the opportunity to do it if you're in public service. I'm in the Senate because I want to serve the country. Being vice president is an important way to serve the country. But I've also been clear, I've never talked to Donald Trump. I've never talked to anybody on his team or family or inner circle about vice president. That's a decision he's going to make. He has plenty of really good people to pick from.
I mean, the reason why I ask is, look what happened to the last guy. A mob stormed the Capitol, literally calling to hang Mike Pence.
Listen,
and Trump defended those chants of hanging Mike Pence.
I will tell you this, that when Donald Trump was president of the United States, this country was safer, it was more prosperous. We had relations, for example, in a part of the world that I care about called the Western Hemisphere that were very strong. We had a lot of good things done there. I think the country and the world was a better place when he was president. And I would love to see him return to the White House in comparison to the guy who's there now, Joe Biden, who's been a disaster economically. Look at the world. Every single day we wake up to a new crisis, to a new conflict. Everything has gone on fire since the time Joe Biden took over. Afghanistan's gone down. Ukraine has been invaded. Now the Philippines and the Chinese are on the verge of something bad happening every single day, not to mention the threats to Taiwan. We have this blow up in Haiti going on in our very own hemisphere. We wake up every single day, terrorist attacks, 9 million people across the border.
You're not suggesting that's all happening because of Biden.
Absolutely, I am. Absolutely, I'm suggesting it happening because of Biden. He's president, and his weakness and his...
It's because of Biden that Russia invaded Ukraine?
Absolutely.
It's because of Biden that Haiti... Okay,
absolutely. I mean, Putin is sitting there saying, these guys can't even stand up to the Taliban, and they have to fly people hanging off the wings of these airplanes. Now's the time to go.
Yeah, thank you to Newsbusters for that clip. I love that Jonathan Karl is debating this guy, first of all. This is not what a journalist does. Journalists are supposed to ask questions and maybe a follow-up challenge. But how could you possibly blame Joe Biden for that? Who do you work for exactly? Oh, actually, don't answer that. We know very well who you work for. This is what I mean by the fact that they can't handle one voice on these shows, let alone in the newsroom or in the producer's room when they're putting together the show. Can you imagine if one person during the prep for this show actually voiced what Marco Rubio just said? You realize, guys, that part of the reason why Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine is because he saw how weak Biden and the Americans were, right? You do realize that. After the Afghanistan pullout, he knew that he wasn't going to be met with any resistance. In fact, what was Joe Biden's immediate reaction when Vladimir Putin entered Ukraine? Do you remember? Because they've tried to memory hold this. They sent him over there and they put a flak jacket on him and a helmet, and he's out there like Winston Churchill marching with Yaroslavsky. But is that his name? Zelensky. I don't know who Yaroslavsky is, but they're all friends. They put him out there and they treat him like he's Winston Churchill, like he's this wartime president now, and we've got to stand by. Don't forget what his initial, immediate reaction was. Joe Biden called Zelensky and offered him an airplane to fly him the hell out of there. Get out of Kiev. It's over. You've lost. Of course, that's why Vladimir Putin invaded. Who doesn't see that? But there's something else here. Jonathan Karl apparently is picking up where George Stephanopoulos left off with Nancy Mace. This isn't just about asking a question with regard to Donald Trump and getting an answer. It's about getting the answer and then publicly shaming the person for giving the answer that you don't like. Nancy Mace saying that she'll support Donald Trump. And what was George Stephanopoulos' reaction?
Judge for it today.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
And I answered
Explain
it. You're
why-
shaming
no,
me for my
I'm not-
political choices.
I'm asking you a question about why you endorse someone who's been found liable for rape. Just
It was
answer the
not a
question.
criminal court. This was
It was a civil
It
court
was a
that found
civil
him
court.
liable
And
for
by the
rape.
way, she joked about the judgment and what she was going to do with all that money, and I find that offensive.
I'm asking you
but
about the
as
man
a
who's-
rape victim who's been shamed for years now because of her rape, you're trying to shame me again by asking me this
You've
political
repeated
question.
that. You've repeated that again.
I think
again,
it's
and again.
offensive. As a woman, I find it offensive.
I'm
For my
asking you-
political choices, I've endorsed the man that I believe is best for our country. It's not Joe Biden. And you looked at the dueling rallies yesterday in Georgia. Laken Riley's family was with Donald Trump. They weren't with Joe Biden. The same guy yesterday that apologized for calling her killer an illegal, who wasn't illegal. And here you are trying to shame a rape victim. I find it disgusting.
I mean, you keep saying I'm shaming you. There's
You
nothing
are.
I
The
do-
question, it is.
It is exactly what he's doing. And I guess this is ABC News's new tactic as journalists when they've got a Republican on. Will you support Donald Trump? Will you be his vice president? Well, yes, I'd be honored to be. Really? Really? I mean, given what happened to Mike Pence, and you can't possibly blame Joe Biden for things going on in Ukraine. And notice something here, because again, it fits with the theme that they are losing. They are losing across the board here. If George Stephanopoulos or Jonathan Karl or any of these people, if they want to make a case for themselves, or even Karine Jean-Pierre, by the way, in the conversation about the border earlier, if they want to make a case for their guy, for their party, for their policies, for their vision, for the good things that their team is bringing to the table, they would. But they don't, because they can't, because they're not. They're not doing anything good. We are way worse off than we were. Marco Rubio just laid it out there for Jonathan Karl. Are you kidding? With this president, with this going on and this going on and this going on, and the Western Hemisphere crumbling and our economy falling apart and crime in the streets and the border crisis and da. And the only response is you can't possibly blame Joe Biden for all of that. And the angry mob was mad at Mike Pence. How could you possibly? It's about shaming the individual and making them uncomfortable for aligning with Donald Trump, because all they've got is demonizing Donald Trump and demonizing you for aligning yourself with Donald Trump, because you dare to look at what things are going on right now and say, yeah, you know what? Even if Donald Trump isn't my favorite, he's a hell of a lot better by 10 times than what we're doing right now. And so that's all they've got. But there's another interesting thing here about the Marco Rubio phenomenon in particular. How could you possibly agree to be his running mate, considering who he is, considering what he did to Mike Pence, considering, don't you remember he used to call you little Marco? He used to make fun of you all the time when you were running against him. How could you? He's so crass. He's so mean. He's so mean tweets and da. Why would you agree to be his vice president? Can I remind you what Kamala Harris thought of Joe Biden before she agreed to be his running mate? This was the debate that they engaged in back before the primaries, before Kamala Harris dropped out because she couldn't even make it to Iowa because she was that much loathed and hated and disrespected by her own party and her own voters. And then they jammed her down our throats as being one heartbeat away, one very, very fragile, barely there heartbeat away from the presidency. This was Kamala Harris and Joe Biden before that.
And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you.
Yeah, this was all preview before George Floyd, of course, but of course, it was a Democratic debate, so they had to raise their hatred for police officers and complete and total disregard for victims of crime. But you heard that you were against busing and you were down with segregationists. And there was a little girl who got bused to her school to integrate her school in California. And that little girl was me. That little girl was me. It was such a genuine moment. It was so natural. It was so spontaneous. So spontaneous that within hours, the Kamala Harris for President website was selling T-shirts. That little girl was me. Shockingly, it didn't catch on. I should have bought one when I had the chance. I would love to wear that shirt around town. The point is, she's at the debate and she has to preface it by saying, now, I don't think you're a racist. But what she was really saying is, I don't think you're a racist anymore, at least outwardly. And she accuses him of basically throwing down with racists and segregationists for being against busing and basically saying, by opposing busing, you were basically telling me to go to the back of the bus. Although, of course, she makes it sound like she would have never gotten a good education. Both of her parents were Berkeley professors. It's so distant. Everything about this is a fraud. My point is, when Joe Biden picked her to be his running mate, do you remember Jonathan Karl or George Stephanopoulos or Jake Tapper or Chuck Todd interviewing Kamala Harris saying, why would you agree to be his running mate? I mean, he's a racist segregationist who opposed busing you. That little girl was you. Why would you do this? And of course they didn't. Because she's on their side. Number one. And number two, it's inane. It's stupid. It happens all the time. It goes back to Reagan Bush. It goes back to Kennedy Johnson. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to learn that politicians find a way to follow their political ambitions to win an election and put aside their personal animus. I'm shocked to learn that happens here. It's so juvenile. It's so beneath our intellect. But of course, this is what passes itself off for tough questioning and tough journalism. And I'd like to give the final word to Marco Rubio. He was on Fox and Friends this morning reacting to this ridiculous response from Jonathan Karl, and I think he handled it quite well.
Yeah, right. Jonathan Karl was stunned about your reaction.
About,
on
yes, yeah.
ABC.
Again, these guys, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the view is that the president doesn't even deserve to have a vice president or anybody else. They've tried to delegitimize President Trump on everything. Right. They don't think he deserves lawyers. They don't think he deserves anything. He doesn't deserve to be on the ballot in their mind.
Well, I'm glad you came in.
Yeah.
There you go. That was a really good answer, a really good response. I mean, from the Trump camp perspective, positively vice presidential. We'll see.